I hope everyone's doing well this evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to be discussing repairs, common repairs that you can see. Most repairs that are coming in our shop, as I mentioned, could be common. So I would like to share this information. If you are interested in getting a question asked or answered, go ahead and hit me up on Super Chat. We had a great broadcast just the other day, yesterday. So today we are again going live. Let me make sure everything is in good condition. Let me know where everyone's watching from. Thank you for joining us again this evening. I just want to ensure everything's online correctly, so give me a second. Let me know. Let me get a radio check. Let me test out chat. Give some time for everybody to come on. All right. Looks good. So today I'm going to be discussing common issues that you can find in your maintenance as it's in the semi truck. We are a repair shop here in Dallas, Texas. So if you guys are, thank you for joining us again, Edward. If you guys are interested in getting some more information or getting some service here, if you're passing through Dallas, you can check us out, 972-225-3017. We're 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas, 75241. Today, as I mentioned, I'm going to be discussing common issues, common maintenance, common problems that we see pop up in the shop. I'm going to just be sharing a few pictures and information on what's going on this Monday. If you guys have a question, make sure to hit us up on Super Chat. I am going to be trying to address your questions as they pop up. So if you do have any questions or concerns, make sure to hit us up. It doesn't have to be Super Chat, but it would be more appreciated on the Super Chat. I'm going to start today's broadcast with a story. And it's because I'm going to give you some photos about us wrapping up the M14 Cummins that we have repairing in the shop now. But I want to start with this story because I am a fan of this engine. I owned one back a long time ago when I was moving trucks and I was moving freight. We had it was an FLD was the model, and it had an M14 Cummins in it. And of course it was a solid truck, very good solid truck, very dependable. We drove it all up. It was more than just a Midwest is what mostly the lane that we ran. So during the winter time, a lot of times drivers don't like to go too far north because of the road conditions. They can get very, very bad. A lot of ice that you can't even see, just areas that across the United States that can get very dangerous. So we had a truck, that particular truck got into an accident, and it was Missouri, and during very, very cold weather. So the truck actually got into an accident, hit some black ice, got into an accident. It's a very solid truck. It jackknifed and nearly took the cab off, but the truck was still good. The chassis was still good. Nothing was bent. The chassis wasn't bent. The engine was still solid. Tires good. It was still a solid unit. So I wanted to put another cab on it, and I didn't want to scrap it out, and I didn't want to let it go. So we decided to, a buddy of mine, shout out to Michael Howe, if you're watching. It was a buddy of mine. He had his own trucks as well. So he's like, hey, we can use one of my trucks and we can drive up there to Missouri. And we were going to we actually rented it's kind of a tow that you put on the fifth wheel, and you use chains to run it up under over the chassis, up under the axles, and then you hang it off the back of this lift bar that's on the back of the semi truck, and it connects to your fifth wheel. And once you run those chains up under the chassis, you hook it up on the chassis frames and you run it up under the axles. and you pull the chains up under the axles, and you hook it onto this bar that hooks up to the back of your fifth wheel, and there's a hydraulic that lifts this bar up so that you can lift the back of the truck up so you can tow it in. Only in a bobtail situation can you do this, and they're still out there. I don't have the particular name for it, but we rented one. Me and Michael rented one, and I'm gonna tell you, this experience here gave me another perspective and more respect for truck drivers, just because of what they go through out there. And a lot of people don't understand how complicated and how difficult it is to control these trucks. So we go out there to Missouri, and we head out there. We're shooting up there. Shout out to everybody that's joined us this evening. I'm going to finish up with this story here. Let me get this coffee a little bit more before it gets cold. So we shoot up to Missouri with this tow along on the back of the truck, and we're in a Volvo with a D13 hauling butt up there, not breaking the law or anything like that, but just getting there. We get there, and those particular tow bar setups, you can only tow the truck from the back of the truck. So you have to get the seatbelt and wrap it around the steering wheel and secure the steering wheel from moving, so the truck doesn't drift. And you install those chains, as I mentioned, pull the truck up, of course you have the back end of the truck up, and that's how you're towing it. So Michael, my buddy, shout out to Michael if you're watching, is the one who drove out there, and I was, of course, the passenger making it out there to Missouri. Now, Missouri is not a short distance from Dallas. It's a pretty far distance. So we get there, we get set up, we run the chains, as I mentioned, I hook it up, we do all this, we raise the back of the truck up, and now it's my turn to drive. And coming out of Missouri, and it's already evening. Now it's, as I mentioned, it's my turn to drive. So I'm getting in I'm getting in the truck, and I've driven a lot of different trucks in a lot of different areas, and a lot of different scenarios. So I'm jumping in this truck, and we're going down the highway, and the way that this truck is towed is it's kind of swaying because you only have the back end of the truck up. And as I mentioned, the way that the back end is lifted is you're running chains up under both rear axles, coming up in front of the first or the second axle, and just hooking into the frame like this, and lifting the back of the truck up. So you're basically swinging the truck down the highway, pulling it backwards. And if you've ever driven a 18-wheeler before, and that type of load is, man, I couldn't do it. I was worried that I was going to get us into an accident, because the swaying would happen, and the swaying would just continue and continue. Very hard pull. But shout out to Michael. Thank you for joining. Thank you for helping me out there. Yeah, I know that he helped me out. I was doing some work for him and getting some repairs done for his fleet, and that's how he was kind of looking out for each other at the time. Shout out to Mike. Appreciate that help. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Share this video. Today I'm going to be discussing maintenance, since I got the story out of the way. Give me a little bit more practice on storytelling. But okay, so we got that out of the way. Let's get this broadcast started. Let me know where everybody's watching from. Let me see. Got this notification popped up. Appreciate everybody that's joining us this evening. If you got any questions and you want me to answer it, hit me up on the chat. It seems like everyone's still probably out there trying to get settled. This is a Sunday evening. I went out. We were shooting today, so a lot of construction going on during the daytime today on a Sunday. It was very noisy. So I'm going to do a share screen and start with that. So the first item I'm going to be discussing is, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about what's in the shop, common problems that you come across, and basically these are photos of what's going on in the shop. Now, I started with the N14. because that's what we're wrapping up with. Here's a photo of just wrapping everything up on the top end. We go ahead and adjust the valves on that particular repair. Now this is just over one single cylinder. This is cylinder number 6. Most of the time, if you do have an injector fail, it's gonna be number 6. For some reason, it's probably the last injector to get filtered out. But this is what we had going on. That's why I was talking about the story on that M14 Cummins, because it just reminded me of that. So this is our standard operating procedures that we take whenever we have any type of repair, internal repair, major repairs, that we take records of how we are going about installing back everything and follow that we are following procedures, because we don't want any failures. So this is how we ensure that we are tightening everything down. As you can see, these are all marked here after the adjustments. Now this particular setup has push rods. If you were on our live yesterday, this is a N14, and this side of the engine is where your push rods will be. So your center one is going to be the injector push rod. This one over here is going to be, I don't want to kind of get mixed up with the photo, but I want to say I don't want to get them mixed up. I don't want to get them mixed up, but one of them is, of course, going to be the intake, and one of them is the exhaust. These particular setups are very, very odd. They don't build these like this anymore. You can see the rocker box here. This is the rocker box, and it houses 2 cylinders. This is cylinder number 6, and this is cylinder number 5. This is also a single head. So there's a head for every 2 cylinders on this particular engine, which is very interesting. And the only thing that I dislike about this, it's a very solid engine. We've rebuilt tons of these engines. The only thing that we've come across is when it comes to parts availability and the quality of the remanufactured part, I know there's going to be tons of people in the comments probably saying, no, you can get these parts everywhere. I'm not saying that you can't get them. I'm just saying the quality is not there. So I've put on a brand new set of injectors, even with more common, more modern engines, and had issues. So these particular jobs can be tricky when it comes to rebuilding a complete job, because it's hard to find, for example, a quality head, because they don't manufacture them anymore. Part of our quality and control is quality control inspection. That's what we do at the end of our service to ensure that you don't have any active codes coming back. And this particular step, as I mentioned, is the quality control check, and it goes along with our courtesy check as well. And this is to ensure that we can catch any additional problems that might pop up. Because if you are coming in for a service and it's been a while that you have the service, and you're having a recurring problem, it's possible that could come back. So we do our best to do an additional check to ensure that you're not going to have any issues once you get a repair done here at TAT Express. So if you're going through the Dallas area, or if you're in the area, if you're from the area looking for service, you can call us at 972-225-3017. We're located at 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas 75241. We specialize on all Class 8 trucks, light duty, medium duty diesels, as well RVs. This is the season for all that type. If you guys are having AC issues, if you had an AC that's been out of service for a while, it's time to get that checked out. Check us out. So back to what we're going. So this is part of our quality control check, and during that check, we ensure that none of the codes come back. This is Insight. This is just a dash here, a dashboard of Insight, where we would pull up the fault codes. And if you guys are checking out the short content that we are releasing, it's just repurposed from our long form about good troubleshooting procedures and good software to use, our best software to use for semi trucks. This is what I'm mentioning. This is actually Insight, This is the name of the software, which is provided by Cummins, and this is the software that we would use to troubleshoot and ensure that even with the after treatment systems as well, and it also gives us access to online manuals. So I saw a comment that just recently popped up about on the short that I just released about not just clearing codes out and keep on going. You can do whatever you like. It is your truck. I just would like to share with you that is not good practice if you don't find the root cause, and that is only going to prolong the problem longer if you don't decide to get that checked out. Let me know where you guys are watching from. Appreciate everybody that's joined us this evening. Probably going to have some playbacks. I know it's Sunday. Everybody's already getting ready for the week. I know this week is tomorrow's going to be Monday, so everyone's going to be ready for that. So that's part of our quality control check here. And then that's why I brought up the N14. What else we got going on? Let me know where you guys are watching from. Let me see here. We got front end work here. You guys, this is another common maintenance problem that we see is kingpins. This is a photo, a small clip of just kingpin play. Let me get the there we go. You can see that play there, and now there is some play that is allowed. There's a tolerance in the play, but now this is being just pushed by a person. So imagine all the weight on the truck. This type of wear can cause the truck to sway. This is more of that front end. This is brake shoes, all cracked, showing signs of brake fade. These can be a tough condition to drive with because the truck's pretty heavy. Everyone knows that the truck's pretty heavy. Here's some more breakdown of the bearings. These are bearings, wheel bearings, close up of wheel bearings here. Now you can see these wheel bearings are pitted. See if I can zoom in and on that for you. You can see how these are pitted. Definitely needs to be replaced. So when you have this particular type of wear, when you have this particular type of front end wear, that is going to cause you to sway on the road. And then you have all this brake fade here. Now on all heavy duty trucks, they compensate for brake fade. When the brake fade happens, this is basically just the brakes losing their ability to stop, losing their ability to create enough friction to slow down. When that happens, the truck can sway to one side or the other. Now they put smaller brakes on the front of the steer to create or to prevent that from happening even more. So if they had bigger brakes on the front, say for example they had the same size brakes on the front than they have on the rear, and you have brake fading happen and swerving happen, it's going to happen even more violently because you're going to have a larger brake shoe. So this is why they run smaller brake shoes on the front, but over time they end up wearing out faster as well. There's an ad that I ran. It's a short of some brake fade that was happening on some recently replaced brakes. And we were highlighting to the customer that type of wear is because the brakes are working too hard. They're getting hot. And when brakes get to a certain temperature, they seal. This is another photo, or actually a video clip of the Kingpin. Now, there are also tolerance for these axle eyes, because since most of the axles are made with the pin not made into the axle, they're separate. These axle eyes can waddle out. So they'll waddle out, and you try to put a brand new pin in there, and there's limits that the manufacturers have, and here it is here. There's limits whenever you go with an installation kit on these kingpins, and there's basically a stop or go tool to check to see if that axle eye is waddle out enough, or the axle bore hole where the pin goes in is waddled out too far or wore out too far, or it's not going to be last, well, the repair won't last as long. And that's what it says here. It says installing a new kingpin kit in an excessively worn axle may cause the kingpin kit to wear prematurely, reduce service life, and void warranty. So this is something that does get brought up whenever we do come across, because not everybody is going to want to replace an axle because it gets even more pricey. This type of repairs is not cheap. So whenever we find this type of wear, we do bring it up to our clients and give them whether or not they want to replace that or not, because I know replacing an axle can be not cheap. So what I would suggest for you guys that are joining us is just getting this checked out, keeping an eye on this type of wear, and if it is getting out of tolerance, and there's ways to check the tolerance. I have more video here. Now this is more of an accurate measurement, so you can see the actual movement. So there is a tolerance, but most of the time when you have this type of movement, it's already out of its tolerance, and then we would measure again once we're completed with the repair. So this is a common problem, which is front end play. Front end play can be contributed different factors. It can be gearbox play, it can be kingpin play, it can be tie rod ends, it can be the shaft from the steering wheel down to the gearbox. So I would definitely get your truck periodically checked out. Regular preventive maintenance is your way to combat these type of repairs. So this is why I'm on to this evening, because we had such a good turnout yesterday that I wanted to jump back on and just share a lot of the common problems that we see in our shop. So this is the kingpin removed, and you can see here are these are shims, and here's the actual bearing, and you would shim this up. The pin, of course, goes in here, and then you would shim it up within the tolerance, within the tolerance settings, so that you can ensure that you have a quality repair. Now, if someone decides not to repair the axle or replace the axle due to excessive wear on the axle eye, that's not something that of course we can't force anybody, but we won't be able to warranty the repair as long as it was as it would be if it was still within tolerance. So here's a hubcap, cracked hubcap. So the technician is highlighting these repairs as well, because when we go back to the wheel bearings are definitely, let me find the wheel bearings. So these bearings get contaminated. You can see how this cap is very old. It doesn't look like it's sealing the hub very well. There's a lot of dust. The oil's already been leaking through it, and now we have bearing failure. And these look like contaminated bearings. You can see dirt. What happens is dirt's very abrasive. So what that means, it's like sandpaper. So the clearance on these bearings are just metal to metal. So once sand, dirt, road grime gets into the wheel hub, because the lack of maintenance and not replacing these are made, they could be original. They could be there since the truck was bought. But I mean, take a look at them. If they look like this, if they look dusty, they don't look clean, they don't look like they're sealing well, it's possible that dirt's getting in there. And then you have, of course, bearing failures like this. And you're going to feel it first in the wheels. They're going to be shaking. You can also check your tire wear. Make sure you don't have irregular tire wear on the front. That's going to be another indicator. And have your truck checked out. When you go in and to get your PM done, ask them to check your front end. If you feel like you haven't had the front end checked in a while, get it up on a jack and get it checked out. Definitely get in that front end. I wanted to share another photo with you. Appreciate everybody that's joined us. I'm gonna get to your comments. I wasn't on the chat too much because it seemed kind of everybody was quiet, probably still settling down. What I wanted to show you is this here. Whenever you check the front end, this wheel, of course, is taken off, but this is how you want to check the front end. Lift the front up and get a bar against the tire, and then you would pry it. You would pry it from the bottom end to get that play. But that's where you would definitely get that checked out. I'm just adjusting these photos. Appreciate everybody that's joined us this evening. Moving right along. Let me know where you're watching from. Appreciate everybody that's joined us this evening. Let me check in, make sure I'm not missing out on anybody. Massachusetts in the house. JVC, what's up? Luis Garcia from Miami, how you doing? My manual clutch is taking a little long than usual to go into longer to go into gear. I got 850,000 miles on the clutch. Okay, so from what I understand on your question, I appreciate that in the chat. We got a question in the chat about a manual clutch or manual transmission, and his clutch is taking longer to go into gear. Now, he mentions he has 850,000. When you say longer to go into gear, when you're coming at a stop, now this is going to be crucial because there's different. When you're coming to a stop, that's, of course, you're clutching it. Whenever you push your clutch in, your throwout bearing is being brought back up against the front of the transmission housing, and that's going to slow the flywheel down so that you can get that gear in, and the internals of the transmission are actually slowed down in turn because, of course, it's disengaging from the flywheel. So it's not. That's basically how. It's not slowing the flywheel down. It's basically just slowing the input shaft, so it's disengaging from the flywheel is what I meant to say. So when that happens, the clutch or the transmission is disengaging from the flywheel, and when it's pulled back like that, it's also using that back pressure to slow that main shaft in the transmission down. My apologies. When that main shaft is slowed down, that's whenever you're able to put it in gear. That's basically, and if it's taking you longer to go in gear at a stop, it's possible a stop brake. If it's a manual adjustment clutch, then a manually adjusted clutch, then you can probably get a clutch adjustment. At 850,000 miles, I doubt that that's the original miles on the clutch. Usually clutches are around 500 depending on the users. I've seen clutch last a very long time, and also depending on the pattern of the driver. I've seen clutches get used to a driver and last a really long time, and then a new driver jumps in and a clutch could go out very quickly. So it depends on the driver. It depends on, I couldn't give you an exact mileage when it comes to when the clutch goes out, but I doubt at 850,000. But JVC, good question. Let me know if it's hard to go in gear when you're coming at a stop. Let me know if it's that. That would help me answer your question. And that's most of the time when you're using the clutch, because I know that could be a silly question, but I've seen media out there. I've seen photos and I've seen instructors showing people double clutching through gears, and that's very different. I don't suggest double clutching. I would definitely float the gears. They're made for that. As long as they're not grinding, you don't hear grinding. If you're shifting in the right RPMs or at the right RPMs, that gear should smoothly just go and just slide right in. So double clutching. So JVC, thank you for answering so that we can get this question answered. He says, I swear my clutch is original. I'm the original owner of the truck. And that's what I mean. Some clutches can go a really long time. So if that's an original clutch, then yes, definitely get that clutch inspected. If you're having that type of problem. So at first there are troubleshooting procedures that you can do when it comes to that type of failure, so that you don't have to replace the clutch prematurely. What the troubleshooting procedures have you do is put a filler gauge behind the throwout bearings. As I mentioned, whenever you push the clutch, the throwout bearing is getting pushed back by the fork. It's getting pulled back by the fork, in turn being pressed up against the transmission housing to slow the center shaft down, the main shaft down, so that you can go in gear. Now, there is a troubleshooting procedure that has you measure the tolerance by putting a filler gauge behind the throwout bearing whenever the clutch pedal is applied, to see if there is enough force. If there is enough force, for example, you put the filler gauge in there and you have somebody press on the clutch and you're not able to pull the filler gauge out, will give you an indication that there is enough pressure that shaft should slow down. And if it's still being hung up, it's possibly that the clutch is still being hung up, but that's one of the troubleshooting steps to check that out. If it is a solo, thanks for joining us, son of Matsuma. Thank you for joining us. He mentions as well, this is a fellow technician in the trade. Also mentions if it's a solo clutch, then of course, which means is a solo adjusting clutch, is basically going to mean that you're going to need a new clutch. But if it is a manual adjusting clutch, you can possibly get an adjustment done. But 850,000 miles does sound like a high mileage for that clutch. So if you're concerned, you're not overthinking it, that would be a preventive maintenance, is replacing that clutch before it actually goes out. Because when you have a clutch go out, man, and it's the worst thing, because you can't move and you don't know when it's going to happen. It can go out. If you're getting any kind of indicators that it's slipping, then it's possible that it could be a failure clutch. Or if it's not slipping and you're only having that going into gear, then have it checked out, have it troubleshot, have it looked at. So JVC, I appreciate that. I appreciate that question. That was a great question. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you are joining us and you're in the DFW area, if you're looking for an honest shop, a trustworthy shop, a shop that can get work done quickly, honestly, and professionally, as I told you earlier, we run courtesy inspections, which is a digital inspection sent to your phone so that you can have everything that we found on your truck in your phone. We're looking at it digitally. That's for free with every service that we have. And after every repair, we do our quality control inspection to ensure that you don't have anything else going on. We do some maintenance recommendations, so that we can help you schedule this preventive maintenance from happening, because preventive maintenance is the name of the game. That's going to keep you from actually having breakdowns. So good question, JVC. You're already concerned about that clutch. You're doing preventive maintenance. You're kind of planning that out and making sure when you do get that clutch replaced. And back to the advertising, 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas 75241. Give us a call, 972-225-3017. We're off of Interstate 20 and Bonneview Road. Give us a shout. We got technicians ready to go, and we got up-to-date equipment so that we can get you in and out. We're very close to parts houses. We can get you up and going very quickly. So give us a shout if you're in the area, if you're in the QT TA, give us a shout. Those are all truck stops that are very close to our area. So appreciate everybody that's joined us this evening. Thank you again. Checking out everybody. Now, JVC, before I move on, I wanted to say that when you do get a clutch replaced, you want to make sure you get the flywheel turned, which is if the flywheel is still within tolerance, you can basically just get it resurfaced because you're putting a brand new clutch on. And you also want to replace the rear main seal. The rear main crankshaft seal on the engine. And that's due to, since you're putting a new flywheel housing or a turn flywheel housing in a brand new clutch, that clutch is going to be grabbing that engine with a lot more force. So that torque transfer from the flywheel to the transmission is going to flex that engine a little bit and possibly cause more than it was, and possibly cause that old seal to leak. So since you're down there, it's very good practice to replace the crankshaft, the rear main crankshaft seal anytime you get a transmission or a clutch replaced on your truck. So thank you everybody for joining us. Good question. You got any more questions? Let me know. Hit us up on Super Chat. Don't be shy. Hit us up on Super Chat. It should be right next to the comments. My coffee's already cold. How long have we been on? 36 minutes. Got a few more repairs I want to talk about. Thank you for that question. I'm going to return to the comments, but first, let's go to the next repair. Let me get back on track here. Good question, though. Good question. So we talked about front end play. Now, this particular job that I'm about to share with you is also a common problem for a lot of engines. If this is a DD15, but low oil pressure is devastating to any engine, and the damage that happens to these engines when low oil pressure happens, and it's just catastrophic. Now, I guess I'll do a spoiler alert. I got a new video coming out soon about this particular failure. Now, I'll give you a little bit of insight since you are here joining us on this live. Give you a little bit of spoiler alert. This particular truck came in, it seized up, low oil pressure, a broken piece off of the oil suction manifold caused this engine to lock up. Luckily, the truck shut down early enough where it did not damage the engine completely. What I mean by that is, in this particular failure, the engine lost its oil pressure. When oil pressure is lost, this is video of the cylinders, and you can see the piston journals down there. When oil pressure is lost on a diesel engine, it basically just loses its blood. You can see that crankshaft journal there. This is one of the crankshaft number 2, piston number 2 is one of the ones that spun and locked up. So the reason when you have oil pressure drop, when you lose oil pressure or you have oil pressure issues, dilution, whatever it is, the piston journals are the first ones to get to have the damage because just a lot of different factors. I'm doing a video on this. I just shot the video about this today on why the piston journal, the piston bearing spin during a low oil pressure situation. So super spoil alert, but I guess it's just a gift to everyone that's joining the live this evening. So now we have a scuff liner here. Now this scuff here is on the intake side. This is basically going to be considered an anti-thrust scuff. And the reason why it's called that is because the exhaust side of the piston is called the thrust side. That's going to be it's going to have more force or more load on that side. It's the relief side. On the intake side is going to be less side. Most of the time when you have a failure, you're going to have it on the thrust side or the exhaust side of the engine. This failure started to happen on the intake side, but as I mentioned, there's nothing on the exhaust side, but mostly on the intake side on that's 5 and 6, liners number 5 and 6. Now, when oil pressure drops, as I mentioned, pistons are the first ones. Piston journals are the first ones. There's a lot of different factors: the heat, the location to where they're at in the lubrication system. Which, what I mean by that, they're one of the last items to be lubricated. So when pressure actually gets to these piston journals, you can see in this picture here, or this video here, this is a gallery here that's drilled out in this crankshaft, and that's how oil is being fed in this for this particular piston rod journal. So whenever these are turning, this is being supplied with oil, and whenever we lose oil pressure, since oil has to travel throughout the whole engine, basically it has to come from the oil pan, go up. Let me see if I got an image of that real quick. Let's talk about that. I got an image of that for this particular truck. This is going to be the oil system diagram. All right, so let's look at this. Oil system diagram here. Okay, so the oil is sucked up, as I mentioned. Here's the oil pump right here. This is the back of the engine. This is the flywheel here, and this is the back of the engine where the oil pump is bolted to the bottom of the engine, towards the back of the engine where the gear train is. Now, the reason most oil pumps are going to be bolted wherever the gear train is, they're going to be gear driven. So what happens is the oil comes in and it gets sucked up through the bottom of the oil pan, goes through the oil suction manifold that's bolted to the front of the engine, goes through the pump. Now it goes back through the oil suction manifold up to the oil filter module. This is where it gets filtered out, down towards the main galleries here. Now you can see the galleries here there's drilled holes inside the block that feeds down to this crank. Now these are the main journals. This is not where the rod journals would be. The oil still has to travel through the crankshaft and to the journal. So when oil pressure drops, this is one of the main ones that are going to show it. That, turbos, but mostly pistons, because they're exposed to so much heat because they're so close to the combustion chamber, and they're not being cooled that well. So this is, in this particular failure, some journals were still good, some journals were bad. On this particular failure, scuff only started to happen on the intake side. If the bearings didn't spin, then what have happened here is, what's happening here is the cylinder is scuffing because it's not getting lubrication. So that oil nozzle that you see right there, let me pause it right there. You see this little nozzle? This nozzle is the oil nozzle, are these particular nozzles, and all they're doing is just spraying oil. When this piston comes down, it just squirts oil up under the piston skirt, and what that does is lubricate the piston, lubricate the internals of the piston pin, and the way that it splashes off the piston, you have a oil control ring on the piston that evenly spreads it across the liner, so you can have lubrication on the liner and prevent any type of scuffing like this happening. What's interesting about this engine is it has 950,000 miles. Look at these liners. Okay, these are the liners affected by the low oil pressure. 5 and 6. Now, this line, okay, going to number 4, that discoloration right there is normal wear. All this wear is normal wear. Look at that. Normal wear. We didn't see any kind of indications that this liner failed. All right, we do have discoloration, but if you look at the cylinder kit guideline, failure kit guidelines, some discoloration is acceptable. The hash marks are still there on the piston travel throughout the whole piston travel, the piston ring travel, the groove, the wear looks uniform. The hatch marks are all still present. This particular piston liner kit has a carbon scraper on top. There's that discoloration there on the intake side. As I mentioned, that's considered normal wear because it's not causing any defects there. You can still see the hatch marks. Another picture of the oil piston cooler. This is a good shot here. As I mentioned, this is the oil cooling nozzle. Anytime these fail, a lot of times, one of the videos that I've done on the D13 that had low oil pressure, it was very diluted oil because he had coolant going into his oil. And that happens when you run it for a very long time. If you start running it for a very long time, what happens is the piston gets overheated from the low oil pressure, that that metal starts to expand and starts scuffing the liner up very badly, enough where you start getting high blow by. And at the bottom of these liners, there's a edge, there's a lip, and so down at the bottom of these liners, it's actually thinner metal, and that's where they crack. And when that happens, you have coolant going into the oil. So this is a common problem that we see as well. That's why I wanted to share this with you. I am doing a video on this particular failure, but this would be a spoil alert. You guys are getting a little bit of insight before this video gets out. Let me see what other images I have of this job. Here's a picture of the piston. The piston's starting to scrape. As I mentioned, some of the pistons that were not affected at 950,000 miles, they look solid. They look solid. I was pretty impressed on the wear that this engine has, and I'm doing an in-depth video on it, so make sure you're subscribed. Checking out some other photos that I have here. Now here is the back end of the engine. This is why the oil pump is towards the back of the engine, because it's a rear gear train engine. The Series 60 had a front gear train engine, which means the gears were in the front of the engine. The Cummins still has a front gear train engine. Volvo is rear gear train. So very, very tough repair that we got going on there. As I mentioned, anytime you do those types of repair, make sure you're doing them in a controlled environment. You want to make sure you can control any of the contaminants going into the engine. JVC, yeah, you can hit us up on Cash App. It should just be TAT Express. I used to share my Cash App there in the comments or before our actual broadcast would start, but I don't have that off the top of my head. I want to say it's TAT Express. Here, let me look that up. I'll take the time to look that up. I haven't used Cash App in such a long time. But thank you for offering the Cash App as well. You can do Super Chat. I'll type in our Cash App. That is our Cash App. JVC. Appreciate the offer. Hope everyone's doing well this evening. Let me know where you're watching from. There's a few more repairs that I want to share with you, and I want to get to your guys' questions. If you want to highlight your question, make sure to hit us up on Super Chat. Yesterday, Super Chat was very lit, or I shouldn't even say that. It's kind of cheesy. It was on fire because we had a lot of people on. It was a good one. So I'm here today, and if you're able to get any kind of information out of this video, I think it's a successful video. I was thinking today, what can I go on about and not ramble on like yesterday's live about political or whatever stuff going on around the world. So now I'm like, hey, well, this is what we do on a daily basis. We're looking at these type of repairs. We're ensuring these repairs are getting done correctly. I have a couple of dump trucks in the shop today or this week as well. You can see it in the background here. You can see it in the background here on this shot. It's a dump truck with an MP8. This MP8's having issues with after treatment problems, and we're getting them squared away. I'm gonna go over that as well. We do work on those as well. MP8s, basically the same as Volvos. So that's why today's mostly going to be being shared about repairs that are happening in the shop, because what's more common than the actual repairs that are happening in real time at our shop? That's very common problems that we see. The low oil pressure problem that I just mentioned to you, if it's a DD15 and you're at 500,000 miles or more and you're not sure that the O-rings on the pickup tube that I showed you have been replaced, or that oil manifold hasn't been replaced, I would definitely schedule that truck in for an inspection and get that replaced, because you don't want that type of failure. Now, the reason why this is a bad design, let me show you here. Let me pull this up since we're on this. Okay, so this particular failure happened on a oil suction manifold here, which is right here. This is the oil suction manifold. As I mentioned, the gears are on the back of the engine, and the pump is being driven by the gears. So once the engine is moving and rotating, the pump is actually sucking up the oil from this oil manifold, going down these tubes into the pump, exiting the pump, going into the other side of the oil suction manifold, which is a regulator style here. Then it goes up into the engine to the oil filtration system before being distributed out to the truck. So if you have a truck and you're not for sure that these number 5, 10 O-rings right here, 5, 10, these O-rings here, what happens is these O-rings get toasted. They get brittle from the temperature change, and they lose their sealing. They shrink. So when they shrink, the tolerance, the fitting is not correct anymore. Since these are rubber O-rings and they're around these tubes, it's supposed to be a tight seal into these bores so that the suction power is not lost. So whenever these O-rings become brittle and hard, they're not able to create that seal, and now we're sucking more air, and that ends up losing oil pressure. Or we have this oil suction manifold, which is made out of plastic. A section out of this part can break and lose oil pressure, causing that problem. And that's what happened with this engine. Is it broke? A section broke off the oil suction manifold and caused low oil pressure to happen and spun a bearing, locking the engine up. Let me get some water down. Appreciate everybody that's joined us. So it is a common problem. If you have a DD15, 500,000 miles, you're not for sure it has been replaced, make sure to get that replaced. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we can get that done quickly. 972-225-3017. We're located off of 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas, 75241. We're just off of Bonneview and Interstate 20. Interstate 20 goes all the way through Texas. We can offer quick diagnosis as well. If you're in the area and you own RV, we also do RV service as well. We've been getting more RVs in since it's getting closer to that RV season. So if you're looking for a shop that's not mobile, make sure to schedule to bring it in and we can get that checked out for you. Thank you for everybody that's joined us this evening. Let's move right along. Let's see what chat's talking about. Greetings from Chicago. Santiago, how you doing? JVC, I gave you that cash app. Hopefully you're still there. No, I'm joking. Oh, appreciate that, JVC. Got the first super chat of the evening from JVC. Thank you very much. I'm going to put a heart on that. Any suggestions on preventive maintenance on big components? I just did a whole one box at $750. So that's glad that you. I mean, doing the one box already at that mileage is good because now you don't have to worry about that. Now, what I would do is ensure at 500,000 miles that you had overhead valves adjusted, which is basically adjusting the overhead valves to ensure that the truck is running efficiently. If your valves become out of adjustment, then you can create more soot. And when that happens, even with the new one box, you can have after treatment problems. So regular maintenance is after 500,000 miles, get the valves adjusted, and then get it done every 200,000 miles. Usually it's around $500 to $600 around that, depending on if any gaskets or anything needs to be replaced. You can also kind of gauge whether or not the health of your engine is by your fuel consumption, your MPGs, your miles per gallon. If you have a solid miles per gallon, in the close to 8s, up in that range, then that's pretty much your baseline. So with your baseline being that's you can keep an eye on your engine and to ensure that you have a healthy engine. So those are just some of the preventive maintenance you can do. Air dryers are very important as well. I would recommend replacing air dryers at least once a year. The air dry filter, don't wait too long because that air dryer filter that's made to screw off and put a new filter on there so that contaminants like moisture, water, anything like that gets into your air tanks. Once it gets into your air tanks, it just spreads all over the place and it causes more problems. So air dryers are very important. We talked about the overhead valves that are being adjusted. You already did the one box. If you're running the truck in optimal duty cycles, which is not idling for a very long time, then you shouldn't have to worry about EGR coolers being clogged. But EGR coolers are something that need to be cleaned before you actually start getting errors and getting faults come up. That's another preventive maintenance that's not really listed as a preventive maintenance in text literature, but we see it very often in the shop that EGR cooler becomes clogged and gets sooty, and without actual cleaning, then you can have EGR faults. The DEF has a filter. That filter gets overlooked very often. It's supposed to be changed out at every 125,000 miles, and that gets overlooked. So you end up getting after treatment problems because you're not having proper mixture for the NOx to be satisfied. So those are items that need to be looked at as well. Now, I know that these are a long list of items and it could be overwhelming, but what I would suggest you do is you can look up online and you can look at your maintenance. You can see your maintenance intervals online and just kind of go by what you've already done and then just plan to do the next items. Don't wait till you get a check engine light, because when you do get check engine lights, at that time, it's possible that you could have more repairs than just some type of preventive maintenance. JVC, I really do appreciate that super chat. I hope I was able to answer your question about preventive maintenance. If you're really concerned about that truck, you can also do an oil sample, which is something that I mention pretty often in my broadcasts. So this type of, as I mentioned earlier, that oil is so vital to an engine that is pretty much its bloodline. So being able to get in a visual of what the blood actually looks like and what kind of contaminants are in your oil will give you a good indication of how healthy your engine is. There's different types of metals that, as for example, I've showed you the different types of metal that are working inside an engine. So whenever you do an oil sample, these different types of metal are highlighted and measured, and that type of oil or those types of metals has different tolerances. So if you start to see a higher amount of a certain type of metal, we're able to trace it back to what type of metal that is. For example, the metals that are being used in bearings, and then we will kind of figure out why you're getting excessive wear. It could be because the engine's getting older, or it could be something in the oil, prolonged oil changes. This is why I always bring this up about if you're pushing oil changes for a prolonged period of time, how most manuals are saying, then be sure to run an oil analysis to ensure that you're not overriding this oil. You can probably go close to whatever you desire, but be sure to do a oil analysis. This oil analysis is going to let you know how much metal's in the oil. It's going to let you know how much life or how much work is left in that oil. I hope this information was useful for you. I'm going to keep moving on because there's still some items that I needed to cover. If you have another question, you want to hit us up on Super Chat, hit us up. Let me move on to this next item here. Thanks again, JVC, for your comments and your super chat. This next item is a medium duty vehicle, and I want to show you these brake shoes. These are brake pads. So check these brake pads out. There's nothing left. I mean, check out the caliper. We do light duty and medium duty as well. So if you have a 250, 350, if you have a Ford, we work on those as well. If you're in the DFW area, Dallas Fort Worth area, and you have if you have these trucks and you're looking for a shop to get these trucks worked on, we do work on 250s, Fords. Here we are, the replacing that before and after. Now this was on a 350. We do service Fords, as I mentioned. So if you're in the market, if you're looking for a shop, and we have a very secured fence. You can see the fence in the back here. This is a 5,000 volt fence, 7,000 volt fence. The longer you watch, the voltage even increases. So it could be at this point a 12,000 volt fence that will pretty much ran by DC voltage. So it just electrocutes anybody that messes with it. Also, there's a fence, barbed wire in the back. We have motion detected cameras that notify us when we have movement in the yard. So if you're in the Dallas area looking for a secure shop, we're the shop to do it. Back to these brakes. I know you guys are get busy out there, but wow, these brakes are pretty tough, guys. Thanks. Shout out for stopping by and getting this type of repair done, because this is, pretty dangerous. I'm glad we're able to service you guys. This, as I mentioned, medium duty. I notice there has been a lot of LTL movement when it comes to LTL is less than truckload. There's a lot of big movement in LTL. I know that most of my broadcasts I discuss LTL and well, not LTL, but the industry, trucking industry. And what I would like to mention just quickly is the amount of work in the LTL. It kind of like shifted from truckload to less than truckload, and they're very strong. The LTL market is very strong, and you can gauge this strength by the failure from Yellow. And not it's kind of weird because the failure of Yellow, they had to sell their assets, their property, to pay all their debts, right? So the quickness, the amount of land that got bought up at that time for LTL was very fast. If LTL was hurting, there wouldn't be so many people looking for land. There is a large race when it comes to these warehouses and these shippers finding land in areas where the market is needed, where there's a lot of volume. For example, something that's close to a port, because if they're getting a lot of volume at the port, they have to move those containers somewhere. They can't leave them at the port. So what a lot of shippers are doing is getting warehouses, bringing it in a little closer, getting it off the port, sorting it there, then able to distribute it out. And that fight for land has been an indicator of what I mentioned about the LTL sector, or the LTL market, being very hot. So, and they also hire a lot of felonies when it comes to. I've read an article that it was a very high percentage of American males from a very large age of working force that are felons. So a lot of these companies, these major companies, UPS, FedEx, Amazon, are hiring felons because they see that's a large labor pool. So drivers, short drivers is not as bad as it was whenever they had stricter standards. But we do service light duty, and we also service RVs. As I mentioned, this is another Ford 350 RV. We also service the larger RVs as well. This one came in for a PM service, just getting ready for a trip over the weekend. So we did a digital inspection for them. We also did a preventive maintenance oil change on that. So we do that type of service. So if you're in the industry, if you're in the DFW, your Dallas area, and you have an RV and you're looking for a shop, give us a shout, 972-225-3017. 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas, 75241. We're located off Interstate 20 and Bonneview Road. Give us a shout. Got some more comments coming in, and then we'll move over to a little bit more repairs. Let me see what we got with the comment section. Chicago. Okay. MM's got a comment here. Thanks again, JVC, for that super chat. Everyone's welcome to do a super chat if you want your comment highlighted. If you want your question answered right away, hit me up. If not, I'm just going through the questions as we go through the show. I have a Smart Shift Gen 3 Eaton Fuller automatic transmission. When I come to a stop, sometimes the truck won't go into gear. In Service Ranger, okay, so Service Ranger is the software that you would use to troubleshoot this particular Eaton Fuller. This is another example of why I recommend getting the softwares for what you're actually working on, because of the in-depth information you can find. I noticed that the input shaft speed has a value of over 400. Sometimes the value decreases to match the output, and it would go into gear. However, sometimes it won't, and I have to power cycle my truck in order to do it from gear to go into gear. I replaced the clutch and interior brake and sensor. My question is, what would cause the input sensor to have a value or to increase after coming to a stop, an idle, or the truck is in neutral? Now, what I would, are you sure that it is showing, is the input shaft still spinning? Now, this was a question that what JVC was happening when it comes to when he was asking about his clutch. Now, what happens with a Smart Shift Gen 3, if you're not familiar, this is a automated system. It's not an automatic transmission where there's a torque converter. This basically still a manual transmission, but the only thing that's automated about this particular transmission is that instead of the operator physically moving the shifter tower to go into gear, the shifter tower is assembled by two motors that automatically shift that. Now, if you have the access to Service Ranger, you should also have access to the Gen 5 or the Gen 3 Eden Fuller maintenance manual as well. In that maintenance manual, it's going to discuss how these different types of faults can lead to items that are basically needing to be replaced on the transmission, whether it's going to be a harness that's driving those gear shifters, which is the XY shifter. Most of the time those XY shifters have to be replaced and the harnesses have to be replaced. If the gear is still showing to be spinning, it's possible the XY shifter doesn't have enough might to get that into gear, and it's could be because it's not getting enough power, enough ground, so it would definitely be having to be checking the media. There should be some sort of troubleshooting procedures or symptoms when it comes to truck not going into gear if you have access to Service Ranger. Service Ranger is the online manuals for the particular transmission that you're going to be working on, and what I would suggest is look for a section in the manual that's going to talk about, since if you're not coming up with any faults and all you're doing is watching speeds, but you're not coming up with faults and there's no faults coming up, then it's possible that you could have to go to the section where it has the symptom fault trees and troubleshoot that particular fault through symptoms. But from what my experience with that particular transmission is, they recommend that any shops, any fleets that regularly service these types of transmissions stock XY shifters, stock harnesses, stock these parts that are in need of replacing, even though maintenance is not calling for it. It just doesn't last that long. That transmission is not being used anymore. They come to a different style. But that's what I would suggest you do. I appreciate that question, MM. Very, very informative question. If I was able to answer that, I hope I was able to answer that or help you out with that particular question. There is quite a bit of people that are still using these type of transmissions, and I'm not a big fan of them. But if you bought a truck that has this transmission and you've already used to it, it's still a good solid transmission, you would have to replace that XY shifter along with the harness as well. It's not on, as I mentioned, it's not coming up as a preventive maintenance listed under the owner's manual, but it's just kind of like the oil O-ring tube manifold for the DD15. That's not part of preventive maintenance. That's not listed in literature under owner's manual that you need to replace that. We just see that in the shop, and the same with this particular types of failures when it comes to that particular type of transmission, is that you're going to get those type of XY faults, or power not going, the harness, batteries, loose batteries, batteries low, bad batteries, any type of faults like that can cause that to not go into gear. Hopefully I was able to answer that question. Good question. Great question. Let's move on to the next repair. If you have more questions, hit me up. If you want your question highlighted, use that super chat. All right. We have, since today we're discussing common problems, preventive maintenance. We've talked a lot about what we see in a shop. Now the next item we're going to discuss is the Driveline. We're talking about clutches. We just talked about clutches recently. And let me give you an image here of a U-joint. Now, when you come in for an inspection or you come in for service, checking the drive shaft is something that we do as well. So in this particular case, the technician found that there was excessive play in the driveline, and that caused, of course, us having to replace the U-joint. These are common problems that happen, and what I'm looking for as well is since we were discussing clutches, I had a photo here about a clutch, or of a clutch, and in this photo I wanted to discuss how or why these clutches could be getting hung up and how they kind of work. So let's look at that. I'm going to put here under Driveline wear. Okay. So now that that's under Driveline wear, let me pull it up. Now, here we are, is the clutch. Driveline wear, of course, is going to be vibration. You're going to hear it in the driveline. This is normal type of wear. So getting it inspected is your only way to kind of get past it. As you can see, we're marking the bolts as well, taking photos of the marked bolts to ensure everything's been torqued correctly. This is part of quality control checks so that we can ensure that we don't have any problems coming out of the shop. These are procedures that we've added. I've had technicians that left and they weren't great. He wasn't and I'm only bringing one technician up, but he wasn't a great technician in the first place. But he said, "Oh, you guys do too much here. You guys already do procedures, and now you do even more. Take note of this, record this. This is crucial if you're running a shop and you're dealing with a lot of trucks on a daily basis. If these types of procedures aren't in place, which are standard operating procedures, aren't in place, how do you know that you're going to get the same service the next time you come in, or the same service across the board? It's kind of like how McDonald's can serve you the same type of service over, or any kind of food chain serve you the same. So when we look at a clutch, let's look at this clutch, since we're still talking about drivetrain. Now this particular clutch is on the clutch. This is a clutch lift so that we can put the clutch in place. Now this is a little bit took us a long time to get this type of equipment, but this is how clutches work. And I only mention that because most of the time you're going to see clutches on a clutch lift on the ground, on the floor. This is another reason why we can offer express service. So we can do heavy line stuff in an express form and still be quality. We have still all our steps that we still follow to ensure everything is running smoothly. But here we are. The way a clutch work is, once the clutch pedal is pressed, then the input shaft is disengaged from the flywheel. Here's the input shaft here. This clutch goes in the place of where this shaft is, and then this face is towards the flywheel. Whenever the clutch pedal is being pressed, it disengages this input shaft so that you can get it in gear at a stop. And in some cases, if it's not doing that, then you can definitely have some problems. So that's part of the driveline wear. Hope you guys find that informative. All right. Went blank there. All right, back here we are again. Let's take a look at some of the questions, and then we're probably going to wrap it up. Let me see what else. Florida's in the house. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you joining us. All right. My 2005 379 Peterbilt shudders when pulling weight up a hill, up any type of hill, and I am bobtailing. I don't have any problems. Any suggestions? I'm going to get to this questions. Okay, MM says he didn't have no faults. Yeah, I would go to the symptom tree. Okay, so L. Simpson says, my 2005 379 Peterbilt shudders when pulling weight up any type of hill, and he says that it's bobtail. Now, what I would start with is, first I would start with fuel filters. Start with the most simplest items. Then you want to do a visual inspection. You want to see if you see any rips, tears, something in the exhaust going into the intake side. The turbo is going to be building up boost pressure, pulling air from your air filter. So ensure that the air filter is not clogged. So when that air is being pulled from the turbo, it's then getting transferred to the air-to-air cooler, which goes to the front of the engine and then back into the intake. There could be leaks, what's called a boost leak. Now, whenever an engine is operating efficiently, there's getting the right mixture of air and fuel. So one of those two items are not getting there. You're not either getting enough air because you're losing boost, or your fuel you're having something going on with your fuel system, whether it's a clogged filter, getting aerated fuel. If these types of problems are going to need to be troubleshot. First, of course, fuel filters. If that doesn't fix the problem, do the boost leak check. There's videos that I've done with boost leaks. You would need a tool to do a boost leak check. If that is still not having any good results, check all your sensors, your intake sensors for any soot buildup. Check fuel lines for leaks. Run an aerated test where you're actually able to view fuel going into view fuel being supplied to the engine to ensure that it's not excessively aerated, because aerated fuel, especially if you see excessive aerated fuel on the return, you can possibly have some problems. Check for any check engine lights. You can have injector failures, but the simple things is what I would start with first. I hope you were able to. I hope that I was able to help you with that particular question. Thank you everybody that's joined us this evening. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for all the questions. I appreciate everyone that's joined us this evening. I hope that you were able to take something away from this broadcast. I'm going to be doing another broadcast shortly. If you're in the DFW area and you're looking for service, so you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and you're looking for service, give us a shout, 972-225-3017. We're located at 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas 75241. We specialize in Class 8 heavy-duty trucks, light-duty, medium-duty, and RVs. Give us a shout if you're looking for quality service. Thank you, everybody that's joined us this evening. I hope everyone stays